One of the hardest things when you are starting a new game is to actually learn every single new unit there is in the game and what they do. There are just so many. But in this video, I'm just going to give you 5 must-build characters so you don't have to worry about in terms of the stress of investing in the wrong characters. And if you do like another character, you can always use them together with these 5 must-build characters as well. In number 5 place, we have a DPS. It's going to be a rare DPS in terms of on this video, but Danheng is definitely highly recommended for anyone to build. And the reason is because even if you pull another Han character later on, for example, you put Seely, Zila, however you pronounce her, or you put Yanqing, or maybe another Han character, for example, like Su Sang as well, it doesn't really matter in terms of a competing role because he has an ability that none of them has, which is basically to slow down enemy units if he does a crit. This makes him very similar to a character, for example, like Welt, who becomes like a boss controller later on as well. This means that you not only have him as a free unit as a DPS early on to carry your account, but later on he will transition more towards like a secondary DPS and more of a supportive unit that is able to like debuff the enemies in terms of their movement speed. Very strong character and very good versatility for most accounts, and it will be recommended as my 5th most recommended character to build for most players as well. And in 3rd place, we have none other than Tingyun. Going to be the first support on this list, which she just does good damage. She also buffs in energy recharge for your team member as well, and it kind of like soul links, so you share the damage contribution for her stats and the character that you are buffing as well. Just a really solid character, and people have quote-unquote called her like the Bennett of Genshin Impact of Honkai Star Rail. Definitely highly recommended for those of us who are able to get lucky enough to get her, because one thing to know is that she's a gacha 4-star, and for most of us, we might not have that gacha luck to pull such a strong unit, especially early on. But for those of you who don't pull her early on, not to worry, there's also another character that you can build, and that will be a character number 3, which will be Asta. Asta is a free character, unlike Tingyun, who requires a bit more gacha luck. You will eventually, as you play the game, you will eventually get both of them, and there is no harm having both of these characters built, and they both make it into my top 5 of the list. The differences between Asta and Tingyun I've already done in a more in-depth harmony guide video you can check out on the channel, but I'll keep it simple for this video. And basically, Asta buffs a flat amount of speed to your entire party and buffs attack, and it also gives fire damage bonus. What this means is, while Tingyun buffs one unit, Asta is generally better for a team that has damage coming from multiple sources rather than like a hyper carry focusing on one. This makes Tingyun much better with the banner characters that we're going to see, for example like Zila as well as Jingyuan, who are more hyper carry style in nature, whereas Asta really is much better for a team that utilizes multiple DPSs. For example, if you have 3 characters dealing quite a lot of damage as well. So these are the differences that separate both of them, but both of them are really top tier supports as well. And the only reason why you shouldn't be building both of them especially early on, is maybe you are super lucky and you put Bronya. Then you will want to consider pulling one of these. But other than for this only exception, these 2, in my opinion, are must builds for any account, and they will add value regardless. You could even run Tingyun as well as a Bronya combination in the same team as well for a very hyper carry role. So I would say these 2 are definitely must builds. And now, before we make it into our top 2, let's give an honorable mention to a character that I think should have made this list, but probably is like number 6. Mainly because this character is much better later on as the game progresses, not so good in the early game, and that character is Pella. This is an honorable mention, and the reason why Pella is slightly better for the late game is because her defense down ability generally is much better if your characters are already all well built and doing a lot of damage. In the early game, especially when you're fighting monsters that don't really have too much HP, the defense breaking doesn't make a significant amount of difference, because if their defense is already very low, that percentage drop actually isn't very significant. However, as the game progresses and we get more well-built units and characters that scale not only with attack, but maybe some of them scale off their damage scales off with defense or HP, that's when you will see Pella start to significantly outshine a character like Tingyun or even Asta in terms of output damage, because defense break is universal across all scaling, whereas attack buffers and speed buffers and energy buffers like Tingyun and Asta respectively are more specific to a particular group of characters. Don't forget, in launch right now, as we have in terms of this list here, 90% of units scale off with attack, but we definitely would see that change as the game goes by. So I'm just going to keep it real simple, and that's why I'm leaving her as an honorable mention and not a must build. By the time we actually need Pella and when she starts to shine, probably you won't need this beginner guide as much as well. Okay, now we are in our top 2 already, and I do think that these are the top 2 in terms of anyone can find value in these characters. And in number place, really is no surprise, will be Physical MC, and later on transiting over to Fire MC. I know, yes, I'm trying kind of like cheating a little bit here by talking about 2 characters, but to me they are the same. And what you want to do when you start off the game is you just want to pump levels into your Physical MC. Don't invest in skill points and stuff like that if you're planning to transition Physical MC over to Fire MC. Why is this the case? It's because Fire MC, the levels pass over when you're switching from class, but then the skill points, for example, if you're adding the damage for Physical MC, it doesn't get transferred over, which means that you kind of have like wasted resources. And especially in the early game, when the number of like resources you have is very finite compared to a late game, this wastage is definitely very significant as it makes up a bigger proportion of your account compared to, let's say, you just decide to spend maybe 1 year in when you're playing the game and you are wasting a bit of resources to level Physical MC. So those are my thoughts. I think Fire MC is a really solid character. There are currently only 2 free-to-play shielders in the game, and that will be a character like Mark 7 as well as Fire MC. Mark 7 has a much stronger shield to Fire MC, but Fire MC offers very strong fire breaking, good AoE damage on the side, and also a little bit more defensive positioning and drawing aggro. I do find it very effective, and especially when combined with certain light cones that allow her to, for example, heal up some HP as well when she casts ability, or also when, for example, you want to just buff the team's damage reduction. There's a lot of light cones available to vary in that sense. I do think that Fire MC is a solid pick, because the only better shielder, other than maybe in terms of thickness of shield, Mark 7, but the only real strong competitor will be Gepard, who is a pretty expensive unit considering that he's a 5-star as well. Highly recommended for everyone to build this character. You need to build her anyway for story as well in terms of the levels, so might as well just do it at the start of the game and maximize your efficiency gains as well. In my number 1 position will be a character like Natasha. And the reason why Natasha is so good is, if you think about it, there are only 3 healers in the game currently. We have Bailu, we have Luota, who has not been released yet. So effectively, your current choices, even if you are super lucky, you will only have a maximum of 2 healers. You are able to run 1 in each side in the Memory of Chaos, and it adds tons of value to your account already. So regardless of how many healers you pull at the beginning, you will only be ending up with 2, and each of them will fill a role and they won't be redundant, competing for each other's position. Of course, this is in the early game. Later on, as we go on and once we get more, like for example, characters that can heal, then Natasha's value does diminish significantly, because she's more defensive in terms of the ability that she heals and doesn't do much else outside of healing. So that is something to know. Of course, you can make her into a pseudo tank in cheesier builds with March 7 as well to utilize her HP, but we have talked about that more in like our team composition guide videos that we put on the channel. Anyone is going to find value in building Natasha early, and anyone who doesn't build a healer definitely is playing the game like on hard mode, especially when you are progressing towards the later end. If you want to challenge, go and challenge yourself by not building this unit. I'm sure that you'll be a little bit tougher than other players who have a healer as well. And if you like such content, do consider checking out these other videos. I've talked about team building for beginners as well in these other videos right here. Thank you so much for watching, and see you in the next video.